Okay, I think Jacqueline, we are ready for you and Sam.
Very good. Well, I have to tell you, we have a speaker with amazing credentials today. Sam Kieschnick is an urban biologist with the Texas Park and Wildlife Department. He serves on the east side of the DFW Metroplex. He's worked in so many capacities as nature educator with the city of Mansfield at the Oliver Nature Park, as naturalist at the Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge, as a science interpreter for the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, as a botanist for Britt, and as an instructor at Weatherford College. His master's degree is from Tarleton State University. In addition to these credentials, he has a certain amount of notoriety. I turned on the TV, it's been a month ago, I guess. And here is Sam Kieschnick giving a report about a mountain lion that had been spotted. And there was a good bit of commotion and a little controversy, and they had him as the spokesperson telling about this mountain lion. So it was interesting, but on top of that, I felt like, we have a media star in our program. So Sam, I'm so excited to have your presentation. I'm hoping everyone will type in their questions using the chat feature and just type it to everyone. And then we'll answer those, or comments. We'll address those at the end of the presentation. So you see the instructions on how to do chat. So take it away, Sam.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here. And as Jacqueline was saying, the mountain lion in the Metroplex did get quite a bit of commotion. And I can't tell you how many pictures of house cats that I got from the public that they just said, we have a mountain lion in our backyard and it comes to our cat food. And I said, well, yes, that's your cat. So it was pretty interesting, but yes, that was interesting. That's the word we'll go with. I think that's the word we decided on. Interesting. So yes, thank you so much for being here today and listening to me jibber jabber a little bit about something that I am truly, truly passionate about. I think, and kind of interesting, Jacqueline mentioned my master's degree at Tarleton, and I studied population genetics, and I used a DNA sequencer. So this is a machine that shows the nucleotides that make up an organism, shows the DNA. In my very biased opinion, this tool that I'm going to be talking about today is by far more powerful than a DNA sequencer. It is just a revolutionary tool, and I am crazy about it. So I'll be talking about the tool in a little bit, but before I start, when I mention urban wildlife, sometimes that sounds a little bit like an oxymoron. Like, are there critters in the city? And when I talk to my dear friends, my colleagues, other biologists around the state and around the world, they'll tell me about working in the rainforest or working in Big Bend or Elephant Mountain or down in the valley and all of these sort of wild areas. And I tell them that this is my rainforest. So this is the rainforest where I work. This little village, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this village is called Dallas. And when I look at the picture here, it may come to a question of what sort of critters exist. So what kind of nature is left in the urban environment, in the urban ecosystem, in the urban areas? And the truth is quite a bit. Hopefully we'll be seeing these guys in the next couple months, some of our lovely bluebonnets. One of my favorite plants, obviously it's sort of a no-duh sort of favorite plant, but a really, really fascinating one. And we have these obviously in Dallas, Fort Worth, but not just bluebonnets, but a lot of critters. With this tool that I'll be talking about in a second, so far we have documented 9,754 species. Now, I know sometimes when we get numbers, when we get thrown numbers, it's sort of an imaginary amount. We can't really think about whatever number it is. But when you think about almost 10,000 species, think of the amount of species that you can name. Maybe you can name a fox squirrel, bobcat, mountain lion, honeybee, bumblebee. Now we have 9,750 more to go. So there's a lot of biodiversity here in Dallas, Fort Worth. One of the things that I have been really into, and I know it sounds kind of lame, but I love it. It is so much fun. I go mothing. That's right, mothing. So what I do is I turn on a light and I sit down with maybe a beverage of choice, but I'll sit down and wait by the light and the sheet, and I allow diversity to come to me. This is mothing. It is so much fun. I have so much fun mothing. And before I got into mothing, I thought pretty much that there were three species of moths. There were the brown ones, the gray ones, and the brown ones with some gray on them. That those were the three species of moths that we had here in Dallas, Fort Worth. Well, the truth is that we have about 1,000 species of moths. And when I lived at an apartment in Fort Worth, right off 7th Street, so in downtown Fort Worth, I had an apartment, and I put on my little black light, and these are some of the critters that came to my apartment there on 7th Street in Fort Worth. One I'd like to bring your attention to is on the top row, the middle top row. And that's my human finger. So it's not a very big thing, but when I zoom in on the face of it, take a look. This insect is called Apache. Apache is the genus, Digeri is the species, Apache digeri. A really interesting insect that's right in downtown Fort Worth. Fascinating thing. So there's a lot of nocturnal biodiversity in Dallas, Fort Worth. How many grasshoppers can you name? How many grasshoppers can you name? Much like moths, maybe it's a green one, a brown one, and a green one with some brown on it. Well, the reality is we have a tremendous diversity of crickets and grasshoppers here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Over 100 species that we've documented so far in Dallas-Fort Worth, in the area of Dallas-Fort Worth that we've documented. This is kind of an interesting one that I'd like to tell you about. This one has not really a common name for it. Myrmecophilus is the scientific name for it. My wife and I have, I think, a very healthy relationship. So my wife is into fabrics. She loves quilting and fabrics. This behind me is actually a fabric that I use as kind of a green screen. What we do is I will drive her to a fabric store somewhere in Texas or somewhere in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'll drive her to the fabric store, and then she goes into the fabric store and I go to the ditch. So I go outside into the ditch and kind of roll over logs and look at weeds and all that sort of stuff. This is what we do as husband and wife. She goes inside, I go to the ditch. Well, I was at a fabric store in Arlington. Well, I was at the ditch in a fabric store at Arlington, and she was in the fabric store. And I was rolling over logs, and I found this little cricket. And this is not my picture. This one is my picture. What this cricket does, and I hope you can find it on the screen, it's there sort of towards the center, at the bottom center of it. What this little tiny cricket does is it finds an ant nest. It rolls around in the stink of an ant's nest. It rolls around in the pheromones, and then it goes inside and it eats their feces. It eats the turds of ants, and it lives with the ants in their ant bed. Pretty interesting. I mean, this is pretty interesting. Now, I know I can't see everyone, but if I could ask, raise your hand if you have ever heard of this little bug before. And I'm not seeing any hands up. Believe it or not, this is a species that lives right here in Dallas, Fort Worth among us. Now, if you're a logical person, your follow-up question is, who cares? Okay, yes, it's interesting. That's nice that there's a little cricket that eats ant turds, but who cares? What's the relevancy of that? And I'm going to come back to that question at the very end too. But a healthy ecosystem has biodiversity. So the more species that we see in an area, the healthier that area is. The more species that we have, the cleaner the air is, the cleaner the water is. All of these ecosystem services are functions of a biodiversity, of a healthy amount of biodiversity. So it's pretty important that we have a lot of species in an area. If we didn't have a lot of species, well, then a lot of these ecosystem functions wouldn't take place, and we wouldn't have those biofilters or the phytoremediation that sort of plants hold on to some of the air pollution and ground and water pollution for us. So it's a good thing that we have biodiversity. So how can we document biodiversity? Or should we? I'll leave that up to you. Should we? But what are some ways that we can document the species that are out there? And this is citizen science. We also call it community science. So citizen or community science. This is the involvement of the public in addressing questions. And the questions can be all sorts. Some of them are not even biological. Some of them can be with light pollution or with air pollution or with whatever, the stars, the different types of stars up there and the different constellations. There's a whole bunch of different community service or community science or citizen science opportunities out there. But I'm going to be talking about the natural citizen science or community science. And it's a pretty easy, well, maybe easy prerequisite, or the only requirement that you need to be a citizen scientist is interest. That is all that's required. You don't need any sort of degree or any sort of little letters behind your name. You don't need any of that to be a citizen scientist. All you really need is interest. So that's it. Even if it's a fleeting interest, but just an interest for the moment, that's all you need to be a citizen scientist. One of the things that I hope I never lose, and I hope you never lose it too, is the ability to go out and explore. And I used to work for the city of Mansfield as a nature educator, as Jacqueline was mentioning. And I joke that working with kindergartners prepared me for my current job of working with city council and with park board and with mayors. It very similar. I have to jiggle my keys to get their attention sometime. But one of the things that I loved, especially working with kindergartners and with kiddos, is that they were not afraid to go out and explore and to flip over a log and be surprised and amazed at the roly-polies that were out there. And I hope, and maybe I challenge you to do this too. Go outside, enjoy some of the birds and the bugs, the bees, all that sort of stuff, and even explore a little bit. It's sometimes easier if you have kids or grandkids to, allow them to do it and live vicariously through their eyes. But I encourage you to do this too. I do it every day. So that's the first step in being a citizen scientist, is going out and exploring. The second part is recording what you see. And this can be, in the past, the naturalist of old When I read and when I worked at Brit, I got to interact with some of the journals of the legendary botanist of the past, Gideon Lincecum, Julian Reverchon, Ferdinand Lindheimer. When I read their journals, it was just tremendous, amazing, the detail that they wrote out, the drawings, their illustrations. It was beautiful, fantastic. We have kind of lost that art of journaling. These days, we have different tools. We have different tools that we use to record what we see. In some cases, it can be a smart device like this, or it can be a camera, or you can do it online. You can post it on Facebook. I saw an interesting bug. Here's a picture of it. So this is the second part of being a citizen scientist, is exploring. So I'm sorry, recording what you saw after you explored. And I hope that this step never ends. The third step that we need to do as citizen scientists, learning. I hope that this never ends for you. For me, it's one of my favorite things to do, is to learn about the new critters, how they live, what they're related to, what they eat, what eats them, all of this sort of stuff. So learning is the third step that we use. And this is where citizen science or community science gets its power. So if you observe something in your backyard or at a local park or a state park or a national park, so you observe something and you make an observation of it or you share it, and it's just a single dot on a map of where that thing was. By itself, it may not seem too important, too relevant, too interesting, really. But when you combine it with thousands and millions of other observations, other dots, then you start to get a picture. This is an example of a bird, lovely bird called the dickcissel. And dickcissels, they live in kind of the prairie areas. Where I work at Cedar Hill State Park, we have a lot of dickcissels out there. And the graph that I'm showing on the other side, it shows, if you don't know, that's the United States. And we have a calendar. So January, and here it's getting into April, and then it goes into June and September. What we're looking at is observations of this bird. So where someone sees it, it lights up with a little bit of light. And by itself, as I said earlier, by itself, it may not be too important. But when you combine it with all the other people that are seeing this bird and documenting this bird, then we get a picture of the migration of where this bird is flying, when it's in different areas, and what time, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of power comes from the combination of all of these observations. So again, those 4 steps: going out and exploring, recording what we see, learning a little bit about it, and then sharing what we see. And this is citizen science. Again, I mentioned it when I talked about that little cricket that eats ant turds. Who cares? What is the relevancy of that? And this is what I do as an urban wildlife biologist. And well, I sort of interpret it a little bit for city council and for park boards and for HOAs and for policymakers and stuff. We'll go through this circle together. We start out with a naturalist, and you can read that as a gardener in Grapevine, or my grandson that saw a roly-poly, or whatever you want to say. Nature enthusiast, nature lover, persons that's outside. He, she, or they make an observation of something. They share that observation with the community, and the community can be your next door neighbors, your loved ones, your family. It could also be, the people on the street or the strangers even. Share that with the community. The community starts to advocate for it or say, this is interesting. I'm really happy that we live with a cricket that eats ant turds, or with bobcats, or with cardinals or chickadees, or all of these sort of things. They start to advocate for that. The most powerful tool is this. I'm bonkers about this tool. iNaturalist. I joke that I'm going to get this tattooed somewhere on my body. I don't know where I'm going to get an iNaturalist tattoo, somewhere, maybe on the neck. I don't know, but somewhere I've got to get this. I am crazy about this tool. It is basically a social network of naturalists, people that are interested in nature, and they share their observations, share what they see when they see it with other people, and other people chime in, give identifications, and it's a community as well. Started in 2008, and now there's give or take 1.4 million users of this tool, about 57 million observations. I also need to mention it's a nonprofit organization. It's out of California Academy of Sciences, and it's funded by National Geographic, the National Science Foundation, and some other sciencey foundations too. So a really, really cool tool, totally free, by the way, as well. The unit of iNaturalist is an observation. So it takes the observer, what we see with some evidence, be it a photo or a sound recording, the GPS of where you saw it, and then the time of when you saw it too. All of that makes up the data of an observation. Here's an example. This lovely butterfly, I don't know if you're familiar with it. We have it here in the Metroplex. This is called a common buckeye, really a beautiful, magnificent butterfly. This is one of the ones that I documented in June 9th of 2016. So several years ago, put a dot on the map of where I saw it. And this was at Cleburne State Park. So it took me as the observer. I put up a picture of what I saw, so I have evidence. And then I have the date and the location. So let's put this into practice. I was working with some students at TCU, or as they're called, revenue units. That's what TCU calls their students. So the revenue units there at TCU, and I'm just kidding, they're good students there. But I was working with the students there at TCU to document the critters that were found around campus, and they found this one, or a couple students found this lizard. A lovely little thing. Maybe you're familiar with it. It's called the green anole, or anole, or anolis, however you want to call it. I don't think it cares what we say. But they found this around campus. So yes, it is there around the campus of TCU. Let's back up a little bit. When we back up, we can start to see observations of where this species is. And hey, what do you know? It's there in Grapevine too. So yes, this lizard is found in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Take another step back, and then we start to see where it's found in Texas. And you can see there are a lot of the urban areas have this lizard. This could be a sampling error. So this is where people live and people have access to the tool. So could be a sampling error, or it could be a lizard that really enjoys the watering of our gardens, or, you know, the urban area. So maybe that's part of it too. Take another step back, and then we start to see where this critter is on the planet in space and in time. So this lovely green lizard, this green anole, it's found mostly in the southeast United States. However, some of these little lizards either went for a killer vacation to LA or a really fantastic vacation over in Hawaii, and they're not native to those areas. So we can actually see a new maybe invasion of a species. So it's an interesting way to see what are the new species that are found in the area. While we're talking about that, this is one that's gotten a lot of people interested. This is called the emerald ash borer. And this beetle is devastating, and I mean devastating, to ash trees. And it was documented first in Dallas-Fort Worth by an 11-year-old kid. He was using iNaturalist, found a pretty green beetle in his backyard, took a picture of it, and that's what caused the, wow, they're here. So it was because of this tool that they saw the new, this new invasion of a species. Stay tuned on emerald ash borer. It's but a matter of time before it gets into Grapevine and Dallas and throughout the DFW Metroplex. So there is an app for this. So iNaturalist, there's an app for it, so you can get it if you have a smartphone. Again, totally free. There's no cost or anything to it. Kind of the recipe book on how to use it. The app, I think, goes through a kind of let's see, instructions on how to use it as you first download it. Basically, it requires a login, and this is where I lose a lot of people. I understand. You'd go, another username and login. How many passwords do I need to remember here? But with the information that we're getting from this, we're not getting social security numbers or home addresses or anything like that. So just FYI on that. But you log in with it, and you can add data through it once you download it to your smartphone. iPhone and Androids have it. So this is an example where I took a little picture of this lovely little plant, not a weed. This is a beautiful, little, tiny, gorgeous plant there at Cedar Hill State Park. For plants, what's really nice about plants is they typically don't mind when you take pictures of them. Usually they don't mind. And you can take multiple pictures of a plant, and usually it's fine with that. So if I'm trying to get an identification on a weed or a plant or whatever it might be, I try to get multiple pictures of it. So this is this lovely little plant here at Cedar Hill State Park. I took a couple pictures of it. Very important, this too, is if it's captive or cultivated. In other words, if it's the daffodils that you planted in your yard, it's okay to document those, but we just need to mark them as cultivated. So there's a little box for that down on the screen. Captive, cultivated. Since this was a wild plant, I didn't plant it out there. I leave it as no to captive or cultivated. But if it's your lovely daffodils that still have pretty blooms right now, but the stems are dead, you can document it. You just have to change that to yes to being cultivated. And then if I know what it is, I can put in the name of it, and then it's ready to upload. This is the part that really blows my mind with it. And the people that are in charge of iNaturalist, some of my friends, I really like those folks. They've tried to explain the technology to me on this, and every single time it just goes right over my head. What this does is I will take a picture of something. I will click on the What Did I See View Suggestions. And it takes the pixels of that image and it compares it to millions and millions of other images, other pictures. It also takes into effect the location where I saw it, and it gives this plant, it can be pretty trumpet vine, but I took a picture of it. I clicked on the What Did I See View Suggestions. I hope you're able to still hear me all right. My internet was sort of going in and out, but I clicked on the What Did I See View Suggestions, and it gave me those suggestions of what it might be. So they're just suggestions, again, just suggestions of it, but it helps me identify the organisms out there. If I look at a picture like this, what's the plant? Well, you can't really see too much of it. So I need to get multiple pictures of it. The best way to learn a plant is to get close to it, to look at the different parts of it. So in this case, I've got a bur oak with those Quercus macrocarpa, macro meaning big, carpa meaning fruit. So I have the big old acorns of this oak, the big leaf, the bark, and an overall picture of it too. It is true that Dallas has elephants. Dallas has giraffes. Dallas has chimpanzees, but they're all behind bars. They're in the zoo. You can go to the Botanic Garden and see plants from New Zealand and Australia and South Africa, but these are cultivated things. So the best thing to do is to find the wild critters, things like our fox squirrels, or even weeds like our henbit. And almost every time that I go outside, I will bring my hands with me. So in the top case, you can see that that grasshopper isn't 8 inches long, but it's just, that distance between my fingers. I can use a standard unit of measurement like $1 or a penny and put it next to a bobcat track like that. Or if you're highfalutin, you can get a ruler and put it next to the moth there. I do have a friend, Joey Santor. He actually has a ruler tattooed on his finger. So if you're really hardcore, I guess you can do this. He's got a YouTube channel called Crime Pays, but Botany Doesn't. Really funny videos where he talks about flower morphology and all that sort of stuff. So Joey Santor is an interesting guy. Again, I mentioned the power of this tool, and I honestly believe it's a revolutionary tool. So these devices, like them or hate them, and I don't know how many times you go outside at a stroll at the park or just outside in general, and you see people glued to these devices. And it's okay. I mean, I see it as well. These devices are going to be staying with us. So we can be fearful of a device like this, or as naturalists, as nature enthusiasts, as nature lovers, we can recognize it as a hook. This can be a way to get people engaged in the outdoors. So I really believe that it's a revolutionary tool. It's not just an app. So there's a website as well. iNaturalist.org is the name of it. And you can put in a location like Tarrant County or Dallas County or Grapevine, and you can see what else has been observed all around it. You can also get identifications through your observations. So after you observe a plant, how do you know if the suggestion was right? Well, people like me, I'm sitting in my bed in my onesie late at night, looking at the observations made around Dallas Fort Worth, and I will help with the identifications of these things too. So it's really a community of naturalists. So the website iNaturalist.org is a place to explore what's been seen around town. Here it is right here. So you can also make digital field guides. So you can see what are the beetles of Dallas Fort Worth, or what are the butterflies of Dallas Fort Worth. So you can get this digital field guide of what exists out there. This is a great book that I use quite a bit, but we have a digital field guide for it through iNaturalist. So I will use this data all the time as evidence of a constituency. So I will show the policymakers, the city councils, the park boards of who all goes out to parks to seek out nature. So I will use it as evidence of a constituency. You can find out what areas have biodiversity. So if it's a plant that I'm interested in or a bug that I'm interested in, I can see where it's been observed before. You can give local land management guidance with this tool. I have used it with a lot of park maintenance to help them manage that park for wildlife as well. And it gives me a little bit of evidence, a little bit of ammunition to say that nature is important to a lot of people. And that's the final question that I leave you with today. Is nature important? Is it relevant to you, to your neighbors, to your loved ones, to strangers, to everyone? And it's a personal question, I think, but with this tool, it's a great way to share that it's important to you and that you can share your observations with others with this community. And I think it's pretty cool that we share the planet with a lot of different critters. We share the planet with so many different birds, so many different bugs, so many different plants and fungi and slime molds. For me, I get so much enjoyment out of the knowledge that there are so many other critters out there, and I enjoy learning their names, learning how they live, and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's cool that we share the planet. We share Dallas-Fort Worth with a lot of different species. With that, I would love to address any questions or comments. My apologies if my internet went in and out on some of it, but I hope that you were able to at least get the gist of what I was trying to say. Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
So, Sam, I've gotten several things from the chat.
Okay.
One of them was a comment about loving to take kids on tours at the Dallas Museum of Art because they get so excited about everything.
Yes. And I don't know what happens to us when we grow up and we grow out of that, but I encourage everyone to sort of find their inner child when they go outside and be excited about the critters and the bugs and the roly-polies that we see outside. So for kids, it's sort of first nature, but as we grow up, as we, kind of put on our big boy pants or big girl pants, we lose that excitement. But I challenge all of us to go out and try to rekindle those interests.
Now, my granddaughter and her friend, they're both 10, went out and buried 2 dead birds yesterday.
Yeah.
So that's part of it too.
And as a matter of fact, that's interesting that you said that, Jacqueline, because there's actually an iNaturalist project for the critters that died in this last ice storm. And if you go on iNaturalist, if you search through the projects of, I think it's called like Winter Casualties of Storm Uri, we've documented quite a few birds and some mammals that have died because of this last ice storm. So that's interesting.
There was a question about, can iNaturalist identify wildlife from paw prints or tracks?
Absolutely. Absolutely it can. So the way to do that, you take a pretty good picture of the print or the track. One thing that I highly encourage is a bit of scale. So if you have a penny or a dollar or a ruler, put that next to the track, and that really helps both the software identify it and other people identify the tracks.
Very good. A question, is there a connection between eBird and iNaturalist? Which one do you use to document your observations?
Great question. So eBird, that one is strictly for birds. So if I document birds outside, I will use both eBird and iNaturalist. So eBird also doesn't require photo evidence. And it's true that it's hard to take pictures of birds with a device like this. I mean, I guess I could kind of throw it up in the air and hope it gets a picture of it. But I also will use my camera. So I have a camera that I use as well, and I will take pictures of the birds, put those pictures on my desktop, and go through the website to upload those. So to answer the question, I use both tools, and both are just tools. So I will use eBird for bird observations that I can't take a picture of, and I'll use iNaturalist for bird observations that I do get a picture of. So both of them are really, really highly valuable citizen science tools.
Very good. Have you used the iNaturalist data to guide response to this emerald ash borer?
Yes. Yes, we have. So I've been working with the city of Dallas on their management plans for when emerald ash borer will come in. And one of the things that we've been doing is using iNaturalist to document where the ash trees are along typically the Great Trinity Forest. And there's a lot of ash trees, a whole lot of green ash trees. So with each observation, we have a GPS marker of where there is an ash tree. So we can compare that to where, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, if emerald ash borer, I should say, when emerald ash borer comes in, how it's affecting the ash trees. We've also used it to document it's spread. So it has spread in the far north west corner of Tarrant County. It's made its way into Denton County, and both of those were made through iNaturalist observations of the damage and of the beetle. So yes, we are using iNaturalist to at least watch where this beetle is going. So stay tuned on that. We'll see what happens with emerald ash borer.
Here's a question. Have you seen the green anole male in combat? And that kind of brings up another question. Is it possible to see videos on iNaturalist?
Great questions. So yes, anoles, boy, when they fight, they are ferocious. I mean, they are little dinosaurs, and they will have this big, it's called a dewlap, this sort of throat thing that sort of goes out like that and be bright red. And sometimes they'll even have a crest that pops up on their neck too when they're especially angry. Yeah, it's fun to watch that. iNaturalist doesn't allow videos. They use GIFs. So if you're able to make a GIF, sort of a moving image kind of, they do allow those, but no videos yet. What some people do is they'll take a picture of, say, an anole fighting, and then they'll take a YouTube video of it, and then they'll put the YouTube video, they'll share the link on iNaturalist. So yes, I've seen green anoles fight. It's really exciting, interesting, and kind of ferocious. Just imagine if they were, 6 feet or 8 feet, we would be terrified of them. But iNaturalist doesn't allow videos. They do allow GIFs, but not videos.
Oh, that's great. So do you have to use a black light to attract moths?
Oh, somebody's interested in getting into mothing. Awesome. Very good. You don't have to use a black light. Black lights, that has a little bit of a wider spectrum, the ultraviolet spectrum. So it's a little bit wider of a spectrum. So you attract more moths and bugs. But really, the incandescent bulbs, those work just fine too. And, it's funny and maybe a challenge for everyone here. You probably have seen moths that come to your porch light. Well, I challenge you to look closer at those. See if you can see any differences of the different moths that come. And I've got another presentation that I do all about moths. And what moths are is basically flying bird food. That's what moths are. So they are flying bird food. So the more species of moths that we see, the more species of birds that we'll see too. So you don't have to have ultraviolet light, but if you do, you can get a lot more moths in.
We may have to give you an opportunity to show us this presentation in the
Sure,
future.
I'd love to. I'd especially love to do it in person, when we get back to doing stuff in person. But yes, absolutely, by all means.
Well, here's a question. Is it misleading if multiple people post reports of the same plant, such as counting and estimating the ash tree population? Is that a problem?
Another beautiful, great question. So with iNaturalist, we have GPS and date and time. So if I observe an ash tree on a Monday, I can go again on Tuesday and observe that same ash tree. And it maybe looks like it's 2 ash trees when in reality it's just 1. So that's why whenever we're looking at the data, we put in the time frame as well. So we put on the different times of when things are documented. Another thing too, when I go out with a group of kids or adults and we go out and make iNaturalist observations and we see, let's say it's a snake, we see a snake on our walk and everybody takes a picture of it and makes an observation. It may seem like there's 25 snakes at that spot, but when I look at the time frame, I can see that it's 1 snake that was seen on that day, on that time. So it takes a little bit into account the other parts of the data. So I hope that makes sense, that I'm looking at not just the evidence, but also the photo or the time of it, the time and date.
Well, I think we have all of our questions logged in.
Was
Yeah.
there one about the giant freeze? Did you get that one?
Oh, I did, but I really thought that that was addressed. But how has
Okay.
our wildlife managed during the giant freeze?
Yes. So a wonderful question. And I've gotten a lot of reports of different critters that have died. This was a rough storm. I mean, there's no doubt about it. This was a pretty rough storm. So there are a lot of records of birds dying. Kind of a sad, and I don't mean to put a bummer on the meeting here, but there's a group that does bluebird houses that documents the bluebirds. And in one of the bluebird houses, there was 7 males. There were 7 males that were inside the bluebird house, and they were all dead. So they went in to get some warmth. They went in together, and they all died inside of that birdhouse during the brutal cold that we had. So, yes, some critters have died during this time. Now, what are going to be the long-term effects of this? I'm not sure. And that's kind of like when y'all were talking about the don't prune your plants yet, see what comes back. That's what we're all going to kind of do together, is see what sort of plants made it out of the storm, what sort of critters made it out of the storm. And we'll see, but we have seen quite a few casualties of it already. I do think that nature is pretty dang resilient, and that we're going to have more bluebirds that will be coming back, and we'll be having a lot of plants that do come back. But it probably took a whacking at many of them.
We do have another question, and that was how come we had so many robins this year and also cedar waxwings?
Yes, we had a lot of robins, and we still do have a lot of robins and cedar waxwings this year. Absolutely. And there's another bird called the pine siskin that we've been having a whole
Mhm.
bunch of. And we call these years eruptive years. So, for whatever reason, there is just a massive population of these that are migrating through. Some people have speculated that it has a little bit to do with the west side of the United States, because they had a lot of fires this year and lost a lot of habitat to some of these bird species, that the birds that have been normally migrating through that area, going a little bit closer to the coast, they've moved a little bit inland, and that we're more of that migrational area, that central flyway. So that could be part of the reasons that we have a lot of robins, cedar waxwings, and pine siskins. But I know for one thing, they removed all the berries from my yopons, all of the berries from my nandinas, all of them from my possum haw, from my laurel cherry. So all of those are the cherry laurel. They've definitely been eating out all of those as well.
Here's a comment. In our neighborhood, the robins roosted in all the live oaks, as evidenced by all the poop on the
Yes.
sidewalks under the live oaks.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, they're utilizing whatever is available. And if it's a live oak tree that has, some areas to get out of the elements, absolutely. So we've seen a lot of them, and I've noticed quite a few robins, especially robins this year.
It also says, could the explosion of birds be related to these birds somehow sensing severe weather coming and that they got active before it hit?
Very possibly. Very possibly. I mean, I say that that nature recognizes these environmental cues a lot better than we do. So maybe they sense that jet stream coming through, and that kind of pushed them down a little bit more. Very, very possible. And that's very good point, Susan, on that. Maybe explanations for this eruption that we saw.
With the amount of destruction of plant matter in our yards, do
Yeah.
you think we'll see an uptick in fungus growth and
Mhm.
that kind of thing?
Very possibly. Very possibly. It's kind of an interesting thing. Again, I use that word a lot, interesting. And I say it because I don't know. I don't know what we'll see. So it interests me to see what we'll see that comes out of it. But very possibly that because of all the decomposing matter the dead leaves, the dead stems, even the dead roots within the ground, that may cause an influx of fungus and the things that eat the fungus, and then the things that eat the things that eat the fungus. So who knows? Who knows? We're going to be all on this experiment together. So I'm interested by it.
What is your thoughts? Do you think it will have an impact on fire ants?
No, fire ants are indestructible. They are indestructible. You can pour gasoline on fire ants and it makes them angry. That's it. The scientific name, oh, thank you. Was that the laugh cue? I think that was. Thank you, Larry. The scientific name for fire ants is Solenopsis invicta. And invicta means unconquerable. So they are truly unconquerable. Fire ants, they are polygynous, so they will have multiple queens in the fire ant nest. So whenever you knock out a fire ant nest across the way, there are going to be other multiple queens in another nest popping out babies left and right. They're really, really tremendously powerful species. Not a native species, but they are indestructible. No, the cold, no. They had no problem with this. They had no problem with that. And yeah, I'm sorry to break hearts by saying that. No, fire ants they'll be fine.
Well, I think we have gotten our last question and comment. Thank you for your passion on these subjects, especially the mothing and the beetle who eats poop.
That's right. The cricket that rolls around in ant stink and eats their feces. Absolutely. You learned something today, hopefully.